I need to tell you this ghost story. Things in the window. 2 days before Easter, I, 20 male, was staying at my cousin's house. I won't say where, save that he lives in northern Wisconsin, while I am from southern Wisconsin. I cannot say that I've ever come across a ghost story that has to do with Wisconsin. My cousin, who I'll call Steve, was staying up late talking about some personal business with me until around almost 1 a.m. He had fallen asleep on the couch about 5 to 10 minutes prior, during which I was just on my phone. It was at this moment that I felt something sinister, like something was there with us. But there obviously wasn't. How many times do we have to go over this? There is! It was at this moment that Steve's printer started beeping and began printing. Because I was worried about the noise waking Steve's parents up, I ran across the room to try and turn off or unplug the printer. Right next to the printer, I mess with the controls, but the paper is almost out. 3 sheets of paper shoot out, only allowing me to see a glimpse of what was on them. I don't know if I can actually handle a story about a haunted printer. I don't think that I have the mental capacity at this moment in time in my life to handle this. At this point, I feel we have seen it all, okay? If you're gonna come at me and tell me that your printer is haunted, we're gonna have a problem. You and I are gonna have a problem. I don't wanna know what's on the message. I don't wanna know why the ghost knows how to use a printer. It seemed like they were completely covered in ink. It was only when I picked them up did I realize what was on them. I don't wanna keep reading. Let's enjoy this moment before we figure out what's on those printed sheets, okay? I was right in the way that they were completely covered in ink. The last sheet was the faintest. In the corners of each of the sheets, I just saw the word horrific. Let's pause. But in the corners of each of the sheets was an image, a horrific image, which I don't want to say here, just bad. Thank you for not saying what it was, but also now my mind is going to the absolute worst. Sometimes it's better to just know, because I am just seeing terrible, terrible things in my mind now. I dropped the sheets like a hot pan and was shaking. Then it happened. This wasn't it? Then it happened. A loud, aggressive bang came on the window next to the door. It's one of those smaller windows in stacks of 3. I have those by my front door. I don't like this. The printer is adjacent from the front door, and I looked over suddenly. For a second, I could see nothing out on the porch. There was no light on, but almost immediately, I could make out something near the window. Then, a sheet of paper was slammed on the lowest window with the same image on it. Are we joking? There's no way. There is no way. To be completely honest, this scenario would not make me think ghosts. This scenario would make me think, oh, I'm about to be murdered. This is some sort of sick and twisted game. I really hate this. I gasped audibly, but when I looked back, it was gone. I heard rustling in the bushes, which are out on the front of the house, meaning whatever it was had begun to move around to the back. If I was a bit braver, or if Steve had woken up, we would have opened the door to find out what was out there and what had done this. But shaken, as I was, and in fear of his parents waking up, I left the room quickly. I tried waking Steve up, but he was groggy and didn't understand for a few minutes. He listened, but soon nodded off again? Steve, you're about to be murdered. It's time to wake up, please. I could not sleep. Well, I mean, understandably so. Somebody's outside and they're sending messages to your printer. I left the next day for home. I talked to Steve's parents about the whole thing over text. The weird thing at the time was that they could not find the sheets of paper which had printed. Their ultimatum was that it was a vandal because they live in a high crime area. But that doesn't explain the situation with the printer.
Spooky story time. In one of my previous videos, I had told y'all about the house that my parents lived in Mexico, where my dad had found like the jaw and like the skeleton of a person in the walls. Okay, well, in that same house, back then, before it was rebuilt and tore down, my mom lived there with my older sister, both of my older sisters and both of my older brothers. And one day my sister was out, I guess. They were out in the backyard just playing. And out of nowhere, my oldest brother, he got an eerie feeling. So he turned over to look at my sister, and he said that standing behind my sister was literally la muerte, or death. So he said that he could see the skeleton face, and it had its robe that it wears and that hook thing that it carries. And he said it was just standing behind my sister. So he called to my sister, he yelled at her because he was terrified when he seen it behind her. I guess my sister got startled whenever my brother was yelling at her. So she moved. And in the moments that she moved, my brother said that la muerte let down its blade, like missing my sister, because she had obviously gotten out of the way. And so they like both ran inside the house, I guess, yelling for my mom. But my brother from then was terrified because he kept thinking, like, what if I wouldn't have called her? What if she would have stood there? Like, was this just like an apparition, or like was La Muerte really gonna take my sister that day? But I guess like on that property, like they had found other skulls and like other skeletons. So I don't know if it's like because back in the day they used to just like bury people anywhere, or if something a little bit more crazy was going on back in the day on that property. And that was an experience that like really haunted my brother for a long time. Not so much my sister because she didn't see it, but more for my brother because I guess he just felt like, what would have happened if I wouldn't have been there and called her? Or what if I wouldn't have looked up when I got that eerie feeling? And follow for more spooky and scary stories.
Let's read another true and scary story. Do not visit rural Appalachia. For starters, this is off the record. I wasn't here. I will give a fake name. I will give fake locations. If anyone tries to contact me, I will do what I have to protect my family. This is a warning and nothing more. Do not travel to rural Appalachia. My name is Hoover. I'm a former sheriff's deputy. I'm 29 years old and I'm already retired with a full pension. It's hush money, really. I'm putting my family and livelihood at risk by posting this, but I can't stomach the thought of some dipshit city slicker going to those mountains and it happening to them. I was a deputy for Unicoi County, Tennessee. It's a gorgeous place. Watching that sunrise over the mountains was an almost spiritual event. I never thought I would leave until it happened. It happened the fall of last year. Strange because I remember it was particularly crisp, a beautiful autumn. The leaves had changed and the entire valley was surrounded by an enchanting sea awash with reds and hues of orange. I was at the station filling out some paperwork and drinking my evening coffee with Richards, my partner. He was a good guy, new in town as he and his family had just moved from Montgomery, and I took him under my wing. He was the kind of deputy who would stick his neck out for you. He didn't mind putting in the extra hours so you can leave early. He was my best friend. Around 7, we got a call for a 130 code for a dead body up the mountain in a campsite. That's not particularly surprising. Unicoi is well known for its population of bears and bobcats. It typically would happen once or twice a year that some hotshot yuppie would come in with 10 grand worth of equipment and get mauled by a predator while cooking. When we got to the campsite, I'm pretty embarrassed to say my first thought was to give whoever it was a little bit of credit. They picked an amazing spot with a view over the entire valley. But then I saw them. There wasn't one body. There was 5. 1 adult man and 1 female with 3 little girls. The man was leaned up against a tree next to their tent. His head was so slashed to hell I could see chunks of his skull jutting out of the mound that was his face. The woman didn't fare much better. She was shredded. Her torso and head was about 3 feet from the tent with some jumbled mush I imagine was probably her legs laying a few yards away. It was sickening, and the hardest part of the job, but I didn't realize this, was something else until we found the girls about 100 yards away. They were stacked, what was left of them, neatly on a rock down the slope of the mountain. Their organs and dismembered body parts painted the boulder red with still drying blood. Deputy Davis, who made the call, was nowhere to be found. It was getting dark, the kind of suffocating darkness that swallows you and doesn't let you breathe. What or whoever did this was still out here. I told Richards we needed to get back to the truck and call in backup and a rescue team to look for Davis. As Richards and I started back up the slope, I saw it. Sitting on a branch of an old oak tree near him was a woman, or what I thought was a woman, with gray, cold skin and a sinister, crooked smile. Before I could even speak, she had already pounced, savagely screaming and slashing with her demon-like talon that forked unnaturally from her hand. I drew my service pistol and fired 8 times in a tight cluster in her side. She didn't even so much as pause her rampage. I think it's Richard's screams that haunt me the most. His whimpered howls reminded me of a coyote caught in a trap, an animal who knows it's about to die. I could see the tears streaming down his blood and sweat-soaked face. His eyes were bloodshot and bulging. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. Some sort of demon from hell itself who came to slaughter. Something unnatural. She finally stopped and turned towards me. When I became a deputy, I knew that I could die on duty, but I didn't fathom it would be from something like this. I'm ashamed to admit at that moment that I had accepted my death. I turned my service pistol at my head and was about to pull the trigger to avoid a fate like Richard's when she was just gone. Like that, like mist in the air, leaving me alone with the corpse of my closest friend on the slope of the mountain. As I carried his bloodied carcass up the mountain to the truck, all I could see was that scene in my head. It seared into my mind. When I called for backup, instead of the sheriff's office, several large black vans showed up filled with unidentified men in suits. I was told to quit my job, move, and never speak of what happened, and I would receive a hefty retirement package. I took the deal. I don't know why she didn't kill me. It haunts me. I can't sleep, I can't eat. All I see is her ripping apart Richards. The day before I left, I spoke with some Cherokee elders, and they told me it was something called Utlanta, a demon who stalks the Appalachians, hunting her prey. Whatever it was, I'm begging whoever reads this, don't go to visit the Appalachian Mountains. It's not worth it. Don't let her get to you too. This one got me. I'm sitting in my apartment, and it's dark because I only have my ring light and my candle warmer on, and I'm afraid to get up and turn the lights on now. As always, if you have any of your own personal stories, please message me and I might read them in a video, and I will see you in the next one.
This might be the most terrifying story that I've ever read, and yes, it is about a Ouija board. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about super scary stuff, and I actually have an email where anyone finds this page can send me their ghost stories. And let me tell you, this one might be the scariest one. And if you've been here a long time, then you know I have covered another story about a Ouija board, and it was my own story. I do not think they're toys. I do not think it's an effective way to communicate with the other side. I don't think it's an effective way to communicate with spirits, period. You should never play with one. And I said that in my last story as well. You should not play with one. Let's get into it. The story comes from Andrea, who says that before any of this haunting happened, her and her friend Vanessa were playing with a Ouija board and did not say goodbye. If you're not familiar with a Ouija board, you have to say goodbye. It is like rule number 1 written in all caps. Andrea says that it was so long ago that she doesn't even remember what they were saying, but she knows that they did not say goodbye. They went upstairs to get some snacks, and as they are gathering snacks, her friend Vanessa walks towards the doorway, which leads into the living room, which also happens to be a sunken-in living room, so you can look down into this living room. And as she's getting snacks, Andrea notices Vanessa kind of like had her head tilted, looking into the living room, curious. And right before Andrea is able to ask Vanessa, like, hey, what are you looking at? Vanessa goes, Andrea, why didn't you say that you had a brother? Obviously confused, Andrea's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have a brother. Walks towards the doorway and sees this little boy in this sunken-in living room with blonde hair and blue eyes staring at them. Andrea says that he was dressed in like 1920s-ish clothing. Before they were able to ask him anything, he vanished into thin air. That wasn't scary enough. This was only the beginning to one of the most horrific hauntings I have read about. And I say it's one of the most horrific because it involves a entity. And I hate saying that word, and if you've been here a long time, then you know why. And if you don't know why, go back in my very, very, very old videos and you will figure it out. Anyways, Andrea says that she is used to hearing things in the middle of the night, whether it's floorboards creaking from people getting up to use the restroom, to the sounds of the house settling, to, wind knocking at her window. Like, she is used to it. However, after playing with this board, she starts to hear things that she is not used to and cannot explain. She begins to hear breathing in her room, and specifically, it sounded like it was coming from inside of the walls. She would hear scratching from in the walls, and she could hear things moving in the basement that she knew could not be moved. And in her room specifically, aside from the breathing and the scratching, which is already horrific, her TV would turn on and off by itself whenever it wanted to. I don't mean like turns on and there's just like the no signal box. I mean turned on and the volume is turned all the way up in the middle of the night, or it turns on and the screen is just playing something that she did not put on. Andrea said that she developed a fear of clowns because she has this little doll that plays music when it's wound up like a music box. That would go off by itself and would get wound up by itself. And this wasn't just affecting her, this was also affecting her family. Her sister, who lived an entire floor above her, began to sleepwalk, which is something that she did not used to do. And not just sleepwalk, would sleepwalk into Andrea's room and stare at her while she was sleeping. So much so that her family invested in a lock for her door, just to get that to stop. Andrea also says that things would go missing periodically in her room to the point where she would have to just shout out, like, "This is not funny, I'm going to be late for work, what are you doing with my stuff?" She would walk out from the room to go look for what she's looking for, come back, and it's exactly where she left it. Even in areas that she had already checked, it would be sitting there right when she came back. This is what I think is kind of the freakiest, is she had a webcam on her computer, much like everyone does. Every time that she would FaceTime somebody from her computer or Skype them or video call, etc., people would comment that they could see somebody behind her and would often ask, like, "Are you alone? Are you with somebody? Oh, you didn't tell me that you had somebody over, blah, 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 blah. Who's that behind you?" And that, for me personally, would throw me over the edge. But the last and final straw that it took to get her to move out of this house was actually a sleep paralysis dream that she had. She had a very small nightlight in her room, and she turned it off before she went to bed, woke up in the middle of the night, and it was on. And I actually don't know if this is really sleep paralysis because she was able to move right away, but the moment that she saw that this light was back on, she heard this wet breathing behind her. Suddenly, a hand reaches across her face, and the only way I can describe it is this hand was slimy and cold and disgusting, like it was dead. Andrea immediately jumps up, swings around, nobody's there. Fortunately, this was the last straw to get her to move out of the house and move in with a friend for a little bit while she was able to save up to get her own place. And thankfully, whatever was in that house did not follow her. After her and her boyfriend met, he was able to tell her, like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a ghost, that sounds like a... Which is just really scary to think about, like, communicating with that in a board and then not being able to shut that gate. Which is exactly why I always say that playing with a Ouija board was literally the worst decision I've ever made in my life. I would never do it again. If I could take anything back, I would take that back, because there are repercussions that you have no idea what you are dealing with until it's too late. And what's funny is Andrea specifically says at the end of her email, and I will quote it, "Let it be known that Ouija boards are not toys. They are tools to be used to reach out to things that we do not understand. But you do not know what you are talking to through this tool." And I wish I could be joking when I say this, but my dogs literally just got up and barked at literally nothing. If you have been here a long time, then you know that has happened one other time, and it was right after I personally played with a Ouija board. So I'm going to end it here. But anyways, that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more ghost stories.
Story time about a woman that made a deal with... This story was shared by a priest, and he says that this was by far one of the worst cases that he had ever heard of coming out of New York in years. There was a woman, let's call her Sophia, that went to Juilliard. She was a violinist, and I'm telling you, Sophia was brilliant. When she was getting ready to graduate from Juilliard, she noticed that all of her friends were getting these amazing job offers, but Sophia was not getting anything. A lot of Sophia's friends mentioned that around this time, Sophia was becoming so desperate that she kept saying over and over again that she would give anything to be famous, and she would give anything to at least have one good job offer. The problem with saying that out into the universe is that you never know what's listening. One night, Sophia had a dream, and she says that in the dream, she saw the most beautiful man that she had ever seen. This man in her dream was filled with like a golden light, and he was completely nude. If you know anything about That is his calling card. He will appear to you usually in his like beautiful form, and he's usually like nude. That's when you know that you're dealing with. Well, in the dream, Sophia says that this beautiful golden man went up to her and said, "Do you really want to be famous? Do you really want fame and all the glory that comes along with it?" Sophia said yes. So he went ahead and he cut her finger, and he had her like sign this contract with her blood. He then set the contract on fire, and it turned into like ashes, and the dream ended and she woke up. When she woke up, it turns out that it wasn't just a dream, because not only was her hand cut, there was ashes laying next to her on her bed. Not long after this dream, literally her dreams came true, and she became extremely famous. She was signed on this massive international tour and became rich and extremely wealthy. But just how everything came, it left. Or actually, it came with a price. She became highly addicted to drugs to the point where she was like herself, and she ended up contracting AIDS from the needles of all the drugs that she was doing. Years later, Sophia was laying in a New York hospital getting ready to pass away. When her mom came to visit her, Sophia went ahead and told her mom everything, even the dream. Her mom completely freaked out and decided to call the church, begging them for help. When the priest arrived, he heard the whole story and said, "You signed a contract with your blood. In order to break that contract, you have to sign a new one with your blood. But this time, this contract will be a declaration of your faith." The doctors were against it, but they still went ahead and drew out this contract and had her sign it with her blood. Soon after she signed it with her blood, she started convulsing and completely flatlined. The room completely erupted in chaos. Like, all the doctors and nurses ran in. Her mom was hysterical because she had passed away. Not more than 10 minutes later, Sophia just literally sat up. Like, it was almost like she gasped for air and just like sat back up, and she was alive. When the doctors went ahead and tested her blood, once again, there was no HIV and there was no AIDS. She was completely healed. So whenever you say that I would do anything for something, just be careful, because you never know what's sitting around listening, just waiting for their opportunity to come at you when you're vulnerable.
Somebody submitted a spooky story saying that an NFL player tried to sacrifice her in a ritual. Allegedly. She also told me the name of the NFL player, but for legal purposes, we're just gonna give him another name. I don't need nobody from the NFL trying to come after me. Anyway, we're gonna call the person who submitted this story Wanda. Wanda says that she has many stories that she would love to share that she experienced in Los Angeles as an actress/model. She went out with an NFL player. We're gonna call him Bible. She claimed that Bible tried to sacrifice her in a ritual. It's a really long story, but she needs someone to tell it because she's really afraid to show her face and talk about it. She said this happened last year around December when she randomly got a DM from an NFL player. Wanda didn't pay attention much, but looking at the page, it was verified. He was legit, so she decided to go on the date that he invited her on. She said, huge mistake. After the first date, Bible decided to take Wanda to his friend's house to pick up his backpack and shrooms. That was the first red flag. They get to the friend's house, and he's like this crazy hippie type of guy. He had a few friends over at the party. Wanda was just planning on smoking, networking, and then leaving. Now, she said she'd been to a few parties in LA, but nothing would have prepared her for this. Well, the guy, who was also Bible's childhood friend, began talking about spiritual energy and hugs. And nobody was really paying him attention. Wanda was talking to Bible, just vibing. Then the energy starts to shift. They're both staring at this friend who's very talkative and touchy to everybody at the party. After some time passes, at this point, a few guests leave. This is when the hippie man starts chanting stuff. He's sitting on the floor and he begins chanting and mumbling. And Wanda says, I swear you, I could hear voices at this point. She closed her eyes and starts praying when she realized that she was actually in a ritual. She said she could feel heat like she was in hell. And she could hear so many voices, almost sounded like native spirits howling on top of other noises. You could feel this gust of wind as well. And at this point, Wanda opens her eyes. He's looking at Bible, and Bible's looking at his friend, and the friend is pretty much on the floor, on his knees with his eyes pitch black. And he had jagged teeth like a monster. This man was possessed. So at this point, Wanda grabs a glass of Casa Azul bottle for her protection, also began heading towards the door. This was her cue to go. So as she tries to get to the door, he tries to go after her. So she tried to leave with Bible. The friend was blocking Bible from leaving, to the point that Bible and the friend began to fight. Bible's friend, the one that was fighting him, was fully possessed, and he was speaking against Wanda's prayers. I mean, even Bible told her to stop praying out loud. That was the point that she realized this was a setup, and it seriously backfired. The friend, the possessed one, tried to jump off the balcony of the apartment in downtown LA. Wanda says she knows for a fact that who we call Bible in the story tried to get his friend to attempt a ritual on her, and it failed because she believes in God. She cussed them both out while they were fighting each other and went home. And she said at this point she started to get harassed and stalked by Bible. He sent her countless messages saying that it was her fault that his friend was possessed and that the devil was trying to reach or talk to Wanda because she's not a true God believer. She claims that Bible is crazy. He also has videos online talking about how he sees demons all around him in people. He also told Wanda that the Illuminati is after him and he's been to the headquarters and he has made a deal that he cannot get out of, and he tried to use her soul. She said he even found out where I worked and showed up to my job one day. I have evidence of all of this stuff. An NFL player? She said after that movie, Him, came out, and she says she is so traumatized by the NFL player and Super Bowl. Those men are into some dark stuff, and these people are doing witchcraft and anything for fame. For the sake of the video, we're gonna say this is for entertainment purposes only. And I've also said allegedly for legal purposes as well. Anyway, thank you for submitting this spooky story. If you have a spooky story that you want me to tell, feel free to DM it to me right here on TikTok or on Instagram. Absolutely do not email me. Thank you. Like I say at the end of all of my videos, I love you, my abducted humans, from your absolute favorite Haitian homegirl.
Let's read another scary story that was sent to us. In the late 90s to early 2000s, a lot of buildings in my city's downtown area were going to be demolished for high-rise apartments. These buildings were very old and often unstable after the many years of them being built. My mom was a teenager during this time and had quite an interest in urban exploring. Knowing that these buildings were possibly weeks away from demolition, she wanted to explore a few of them. She had found one building that was beautiful, stained glass windows, and an aura she could feel coming from it. She got two of her friends together and they decided to break into the building to see what was inside. Upon entering, her and her friends split up throughout the exploration. She had spent some time upstairs and got a beautiful piece of stained glass before heading to the basement as her friends took their time on other areas. Having interest in urban exploration before, she brought a flashlight and other necessities to make sure she was safe. Going through the rooms in the basement, she felt very eerie, which isn't common for her at all. One of the last rooms she entered will never cease to horrify her. In the room was the ghost of a little girl, with clothes that matched the 1800s. She wasn't transparent either, she was completely solid, and she just stood there staring at my mom. My mom ran, terrified of what she saw and how that even happened to her. She dropped her flashlight and kept running to her friends, yelling, "We have to go now." They left very soon after and explained to my mom that they didn't see anything off about the house, but my mom knew what she saw. Where that building was now is high-rise apartments, and they can't keep tenants. I wonder why. Yeah, if I moved into an apartment and it was haunted, I would definitely move out. And it sounds like that area is definitely haunted, so I can see why they can't keep tenants. I do feel bad for the little girl, though. If she looked like she was dressed from the 1800s, then that would mean that she's been there for a long time. Since this happened in the 90s, like early 2000s, hopefully she's not stuck there anymore. Hopefully she made her way to the other side. Let's read another spooky story that was sent to us. This happened when I was 12 years old. I live in eastern Michigan, and it was around 6:30 in the morning when I had to leave to go to my bus stop. I live on a very open hill, and about 2,000 feet away from my house is my neighbor's house. My bus stop was at his house, so I would have to go down my hill while it's dark out and cross open fields to get to his house. One morning, I get to his house and realize that he's not going to school that day, so I wait for the bus to come, and when it arrived, it went straight past me. I just thought maybe it didn't see me because it was dark out, so I called my dad and started walking back to my house. As I got to the driveway, my dad answered the phone and I told him that I missed the bus, and he just told me to go back home and he would find me a ride. Since I was on the phone with him, I couldn't have my flashlight on, and all of a sudden I heard a giant creature rumbling in the bushes next to me. Where I live, the only wild animals that live around here are deer, coyotes, rabbits, and fox, and this was not any of those animals. This sounded like it was giant, like 7 feet tall. Then I heard giant footsteps walking towards me. I didn't know what to do in this situation, but my fight or flight kicked in, and I hauled ass uphill without stopping, and I dropped my phone while I was running. I was so scared. The second I got back in the house, I threw up. My dad told me when I dropped my phone, he heard footsteps following behind me. After that, we had motion sensor lights and cameras set up all around the property.
See, and this is why I do not go outside when it's dark. I mean, whether this was something supernatural or truly was a wild animal or could have been a man, those are all dangerous and all scary. I would freak out. I would never be able to walk back to my bus stop ever again.
This is one of the coolest glitch in the Matrix, if that's what you want to call it, stories I think I've heard. Or at least definitely the most peculiar and, dare I say, confusing. All right, buckle up. So this girl, Alex, says that 10 years ago, she would go to the beach every single day from 8 in the morning till 7 p.m. She said they had a huge friend group and a very best friend who was super close with her. And she said, let's call her Carrie. She also mentions a young girl that would work at the Slurpee stand and her name was Hannah. She said Hannah was really nice to them and would always give them free candy. So they really liked her. Okay, so first things first, she says her best friend Carrie, she would always say these random things that didn't make any sense. Talking about things that she says happened that never actually happened. She said her best friend Carrie would kind of zone out and say things like, hey, do you remember that one time when you met that celebrity? She'd even go on to explain specifically where and what time. And her friend is thinking that never happened. She's like, I wish it did happen, but legit, it never happened. She'd also bring up things like, do you remember buying specific items at a specific store? And again, she's just that never happened. She said she used to think she was kind of crazy because it left her very confused. Okay, and then it got really weird because that girl, Hannah, who worked at the Slurpee stand, she would always used to talk about having a baby girl. She would talk about legit having a daughter. She would talk about how she was born in September. And she would talk some days about how, I was up super late with the baby. She'd even talk about how she has to drop her off or pick her up from daycare. And she named the daycare. But come to find out, when she would go home and talk to her mom and just talk about her day, her mom was like, no, Hannah doesn't have a daughter. Because I guess the mom and Hannah's mom were friends. She's like, Hannah definitely doesn't have a daughter. And now she's super confused. She's just like, am I mishearing things? She keeps thinking back, though, that Hannah directly told multiple people while they were all hanging out at her stand that she had this baby and all these stories about this baby. But they apparently weren't true according to the mother. So she just kind of assumed I must be mishearing things. And then it just kept getting weirder because Carrie said to her the one day, oh my gosh, yeah, I saw Hannah with her baby the other day at the restaurant. And now it's okay, what the heck is the true story here? Does she or does she not have a child? Okay, fast forward about 4 years. So this girl telling the story says that her and Carrie had a falling out during a fight, and she hasn't seen or spoken to her in a long while. But she does say that Hannah, 4 years later, did get pregnant and have a daughter who was born in September. She would also go on to say that Carrie definitely did put her daughter into that specific daycare that she had spoken about doing so 4 years prior. She also said that the things that Carrie had said 4 years prior, do you remember meeting that celebrity at that specific place, or that item that you purchased at that specific store, they all started coming true. Everything Carrie would say that back in the day, her friend was like, what are you even talking about? Started to happen. Word for word, in detail, exactly how it happened. She said since she started to discover that these things were coming true, she did try to look Carrie back up, and she cannot find her anywhere. She looks on all the social media platforms and she cannot find her. As for the whole Hannah and her baby girl situation, there was no Hannah with 2 kids now. 4 years later, it's not like Hannah had a second daughter. It was the first time she was having the daughter, and all of the things that she had described back 4 years prior were sort of happening in real time now. 4 years later. This person says that they have no freaking idea what this could be, and the only thing that they can say is it's got to be some kind of a glitch in the Matrix. She's like, I just cannot explain it. If anybody else could explain it, I would be relieved. So drop your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear what you think. And if you have your own creepy story time, please submit it to the email in my bio. And finally, if you are new here, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of this girl that I went to high school with, who strongly believed that she had an ancestral calling and she had to go initiate inside the water. So I knew this girl from extra classes, Saturday school type vibes. When I was in grade 8, she was in grade 10, right? And we were really cool. Like, she was fun to be around, you know. And also another thing that you need to know, she was a hardcore Christian. Like, she would carry her Bible to school, you know. Before school started, like, she would be sitting alone and she would be praying while we are socializing. She'd pray over her books. Like, she was just a hardcore Christian. So one day things changed. I stopped seeing her completely at Saturday classes or whatever, and I was like, maybe she got with the program, she understands her work, it's chilled. One of the girls that knew her, you know, I asked them about her because it had been a really long time. So I spoke to her and I was like, hey, where is so and so, because, you know, I haven't seen her and I want her number. And she's like, hey, so and so. Apparently there was this pastor that came to their school and started praying for kids. You know, those pastors that put their hands on you and then you fall down. And apparently she fell down and she started admitting to things that she wasn't doing, like that they were shocked to hear, like that she's a witch, she flies at night with her grandma, X, Y, and Z, because they were like, baby girl, like, you're a Christian, what do you mean, you know? And after that, apparently she was just never the same. She started coming to school in those traditional healers cloths. She started coming to school with beads. Like, you could tell that she was somebody that stopped bathing, you know. Like, she just lost her mind after that. And people obviously assume that she got exposed, that's why she's acting crazy. She got caught. And apparently she started telling people that she needs to go initiate inside the water, like that her parents need to get a cow and they leave the cow there and then she goes inside. And it was just crazy, bruh. It was just crazy. It honestly didn't feel right because I know this person, like, personally. And if she was really a witch, don't you think, I don't know, man, like, I would have known. Like, I feel like I would have known. So this one time, I don't remember where I was coming from or where I was going. I bumped into her and, you know, the girl was right. Like, she looked like somebody that didn't bath for days. So I spoke to her and I was like, hey, like, it's been so long. And she was like, yo, it's been so long, bruh. Like, I'm not even in school anymore. And I was like, why? And she said to me, like, you should never in a million years allow those pastors that come to school to pray for you and put their hands on you, because once they put their hands on you, they put a spell on you. I was like, whoa, what do you mean? What happened? Like, obviously, I'm acting like I don't know what happened. So she tells me that it is unfortunate that she went to school and this teacher brought a pastor to school, and apparently this pastor was like, the teacher was like, these kids are filled with demons, they need to get prayed for because of the way that they act, blah, blah, blah. Like, guys, puberty is a phase that some people get out of and some people don't get out of. Some people find themselves as drug addicts. Some people get out of that phase and they're like, yo, like, we had a time. You know, calling it demonic is just, you know. And so she's like, this pastor got there and she started praying for all the learners. And she's like, she kept on running away from this person because she knew that this person is not of God. And she's like, they took her to a room and they started praying for her because she ran away. Yo, Uti, when she got into that room, she felt a spirit, like she felt something get inside her body and she doesn't know what that was. And I was like, why didn't you pray? She's like, girl, I felt like I was being tied up and I was being held in chains and they covered my mouth and I couldn't say anything. And they just kept on praying and I was screaming. And apparently she says, people say that she was saying things. And she's like, what? She was like, she does not have a grandma on both sides of her parents. So which grandma are they talking about, right? Because she's always with her immediate family and she has a cousin or two, but they don't really talk like that. And she doesn't really visit those people. So how? You know, how? I don't know what to say to her because I was just like, yo. And she's like, this thing is literally bothering her. She's like, as much as I'm telling you about this, sometimes she goes to sleep and she starts dreaming of herself in the water and she's just swimming and she's swimming with this particular pastor. And I'm like, girl. And she's like, you know what's crazy there is that she's dreaming of herself swimming with this pastor, but her family didn't believe her because they thought, girl, you got the DEMONS, like something is wrong with you, because she says she has been to the psych ward a couple of times. And so she's like, when she's dreaming of this pastor, what's crazy is when she wakes up, her family tells her that she was in a trance. So she basically wakes up and she goes into a trance and she thinks that she's dreaming. Mind you, she's in the kitchen trying to take the key to leave and go to the waters because apparently she has an ancestral spirit. She's like, I literally am dreaming of myself swimming with this particular pastor. As I'm dreaming of myself sleeping with this particular pastor, there is this, she says there's a spirit that's telling her family that she needs to go to the waters and they need to, and she's like, her family needs to like restrain her, like, it's crazy. She's like, like, it is a lot, y'all. She started crying and she was like, I don't know what to do because nobody believes me that this person prayed for me and this happened. I don't believe in these things. And I'm just like, And she tells me the amount of times that she's tried to commit the S word. And I was like, girl, like, this is crazy. Like, I didn't even know what to say. Because I've never experienced such, like, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know, bro. I don't know. And obviously I was like, I'm so sorry, man. I'll just keep praying for you. Because me and her used to talk about God. We used to talk about the Lord because she knew God and I knew God. Even though I wasn't as holy as she was. So I told her I'll pray for you, whatever. And so one day, guys, I start praying for this girl. As I'm praying for this girl, her name keeps on running away. Do you know, have you ever been like, God, can you please protect Mary? And then every time you say Mary, your eyes open and the prayer just vanishes. And you try to pray again. And every single time you say that particular person's name, the name vanishes. And you just find yourself opening your eyes. And I was just like, you know what, whatever. A couple of minutes later, I find out that baby girl is missing. And they believe that she drowned. Because apparently, she slept during the day and she disappeared after that. Obviously, that means her trance started and nobody was there to watch her, because usually the family members of this girl never allowed her to sleep unless they were there, because every time you sleep you die, you get. Because she did tell me that at some point they had to tie her to the bed so that she does not leave the house. So apparently they found her clothes, like her underwear, her jeans that she was wearing, the t-shirt, her shoes, folded nice and neatly next to the river or whatever that she went to. And the day before, unfortunately for her, it was raining, so I think she went inside that water, y'all, and she drowned. A few days later, her body surfaced because, dead bodies float apparently. And y'all, they found her, and yeah, that was it. Like, girl was really traumatized, girl was really going through the most, and I just feel bad for her, man. So I'm just gonna give you guys advice. Like, those freaking pastors that come to your guys' school and pray for y'all, tell them, if they want to pray for y'all, tell them, no, my mom did not consent to this, I don't want to. And if they force you, you can take them to the department, do something. Those people will get you in trouble one day, because you genuinely believe that they're actually helping Gandhi.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. Bracelet that comes in a 2-pack with a necklace and a bracelet. It's cute. It would be a great Valentine's gift. On to the story. This is a true story, but I've never had anyone believe me besides my mom. Go mom. When I was younger, me, my dad, and my sister live in a different house than we do now. My stepmom was my daycare provider, and she used to live in the house that the daycare was run out of. There was a decently long hallway full of books that had the bathroom to the right. As a kid, I always hated this hallway because no matter how bright it was, it always just felt really dark. We would pick books to read off of the shelf, and I would feel breath on my neck or just generally feel like someone was watching me. Hell no. It never felt necessarily malevolent, but it was always scary to feel like I wasn't alone. I got used to that specific feeling, and then I started feeling it at home. I don't like that. I've always had very bad nightmares and sleep paralysis, so when I started seeing a little girl at the end of my bed, I wasn't really surprised. You weren't really surprised? Were you scared? Because I would have been fucking petrified. She was blonde and wore very modern clothes, a pink t-shirt and jeans. She reminded me a lot of my sister, which was disarming, but she would give me the feeling from the hallway. I'd see her on a regular basis just standing at the end of my bed whenever I'd have instances of sleep paralysis. And you're just, like, dealing with it? You're just going on with your fucking life? Just like, oh, hey. What? I never really thought much of it because she didn't do anything. What do you mean? There is a fucking random bitch ghost lady standing at the edge of your bed out of nowhere. Just don't think anything of it? Come on. I'd either go back to sleep or I'd blink and she'd be gone. Years later, we moved. I didn't see her anymore. About 2 years passed and I had forgotten about the little girl at the end of the bed. I could never. Then she came back. I woke up having sleep paralysis and saw her. Now that I was older, I really chalked it up to the sleep paralysis, having a better understanding of how it worked. Then she moved. Fully sprinting, she ran up from the foot of the bed on all fours to sit on top of me. Bitch, you are lying. You're lying on all fours? All fucking fours? I wouldn't be able to tell this story because I'd be dead.
from cardiac fucking arrest, bitch. She stared at me, and I've never felt as much fear as I did in that moment until her cold fingers wrapped around my neck. She choked me as I struggled to breathe while unable to move. At some point, it felt like I passed out. What the fuck? I woke up the next morning to a sore throat and looked in the mirror to see tiny red splotches that resembled a little girl's finger. I don't know if she was mad that I moved away, but my mom told me years later that she never looked in that hallway mirror. She knew she'd see something she didn't want to, and I can't help but wonder if she would have seen a blonde little girl in a pink t-shirt. Ugh! That is scary as fuck. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. 10 out of 10, do not recommend. Then she just went away? What the fuck? Y'all rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. That's a fucking 10 for me because, bitch, you're choking me. You're a ghost. You're choking me. Sleep paralysis. Trying to paralyze me forever, but like with life. Ugh. I'm so sorry. I took some cold medicine and it's really making me a little bit loopy. A little bit more extra than I normally am. Anyways, I will see y'all the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
I had not been to Ireland before that wet October, and truth be told, I didn't want to go then. Don't get me wrong, I loved Seamus, he was a mate, but, oh God, I don't want to talk about it. The wake was in a low, whitewashed pub on the edge of Dunvale, a farming town half swallowed by the hills. The place was alive that night, music, laughter. They said Seamus had been a fine lad, full of mischief, died young. They said he'd jumped from the cliffs by the old castle road. Aye, jumped, fell, or was pushed. Either way, he'll be starring in the next Little Mermaid film with the fishes. For God's sake, Donald! Someone said. What, too soon? He's been dead for 3 days, and he still has better colour than you, Maggie. Donald replied.
Zing.
Zing.
Sick burn.
That is quite a sick burn. As the night wore on and the fire burned low, I found myself talking to McTavish, a red-bearded Scotsman. I hadn't seen him for some time before then. He had a booming laugh and a taste for the macabre. So around 3 o'clock in the morning, when the fiddler had passed out and the candles were pools of wax, McTavish clapped his hands and said, "Who's for a bit of ghost hunting then? They say Dunvale's castle's got more spirits than this pub." The locals chuckled uneasily, but only I took him up on it. Perhaps it was the whiskey, or perhaps the wind outside promising to clear the head. But soon the two of us were trudging up the hill, lanterns swinging, mist curling around our boots. Dunvale Castle was no ruin of romance. It was a jagged black skeleton of stone rising from the earth like a clenched hand. McTavish whistled low. "Beautiful, isn't it? God, I wish Seamus was here." If he was, I said, he wouldn't want to speak to us now, would he? After everything. "Aye," said McTavish, his eyes full of regret. "I'd like to buy him one more pint, though, for the trouble." We stood there admiring the castle when McTavish froze beside me. "There," he said quietly, "by the wall." At first I thought it was the trick of the fog, but then I saw him. A man, half hidden behind the broken archway. His clothes were dark, quite damp-looking, and his head hung at an unnatural angle. His eyes black and a sinister smile playing on his lips. So there's 5. He lifted one arm as though beckoning. Then he began to run towards us. "He's coming fast," I hissed. "Aye," said McTavish, "and how can I think it's for a drink?" We ran. We didn't look back. McTavish was cursing under his breath the entire way. "Bloody hell! I knew this was a bad idea! I'm a man of science!" When we reached the edge of town, the church bell rang 3 times, though there was no wind to move it. We said little after that. Each went to his room at the inn shaking, too proud to admit our fear. I locked my door and told myself that I just dreamt it. So I lay in bed, trying to tell myself that McTavish and I had drunk too much whiskey when I felt it. The sudden drop in temperature. The smell of seawater and rotting fish. Then came the sound, the wet slap of bare feet on the floorboards. I opened my eyes. He was there. Seamus, standing by the window, water dripping from his hair, eyes black and empty. His mouth moved, a voice came out like stones grinding underwater. "You laughed and laughed and laughed, and then he vanished." The next morning, McTavish was gone. His room looked as if he'd fled in a hurry. Door open, sheets torn, the scent of seaweed heavy in the air. I found him later down by the rocks, just staring into the grey waves. He didn't speak, he just pointed towards the cliffs. There, tangled in the rocks below Dunvale Castle, was a man. I squinted to make him out. He was stood so still, except he was waving. And was that laughter that I could hear, being carried over by the wind? McTavish turned to me, face white as chalk. "That night we teased him. The jokes about his accent, his luck, his blood. You and me both drunk as lords. He begged us to stop." I thought we were just joking. I said. So did he, said McTavish, until gravity joined in. And I did remember the laughter, the taunts, Seamus's pale face under the moonlight, and then silence. The fall. He hadn't slipped, though. He'd jumped, and we'd told ourselves that it was an accident. But Seamus hadn't stayed in the sea. He'd followed us. That night I tried to leave Dunvale, but as I packed my case, I heard it again. Wet footsteps dragging closer. I slept fitfully, laughter filling my ears, but I didn't know where it was coming from. I woke at the crack of dawn and stared out of my window to the cliffs. The man was still there, waving, just as he had been the day before, but there was one big difference. Another man was stood next to him. He had a red beard and was wearing a kilt. I already knew what I would find. His bed was empty and the floors were slick with salt water. I'm writing this by candlelight. I've yet to leave as there's a storm brewing and the North Eastern Railway Service can't cope and obviously cancelled my train. Outside, the wind howls and I can hear laughter again. I can hear them on the stairs now. Slow, deliberate steps. 2 sets of footsteps. There were 3 of us that night. An Englishman, an Irishman, and a Scotsman. It's funny, I whispered to myself. The Irishman was always the butt of the joke. But now, the Irishman's the one telling the punchline.
Oh, mic drop!
The end!
Yeah, I'm back with another scary story time. This is from both of my parents, my mom and my dad. So get your snacks, get your blankets, turn the lights off, and listen, okay? Little backtrack. My parents were young. I don't recall what age they were. But, like, they was going through their little problems at this time. So they had broken up for, like, 6 months. My dad was staying in the city that we were staying in. And my mom had went back to New York City with him. My mom ends up coming back out here. And then they both decided they're going to work together, get back together, and, like, get a new place to stay. They start applying and, like, asking for tours for, like, 3 apartments, and then the 4th one I think was a house, or it might have been 2 apartments and the 3rd one was a house. It was something like that. But they were calling, leaving voicemails. Nobody was answering. But the one call back that they did get was from the house, and this was in Schenectady. At this time, me and my siblings were pretty small. I think it was 3 of us at the time. So yeah, my parents was just like, this is a good enough space for at least right now. So now it's time for them to tour the house. They toured the house, and my dad said where they were staying at temporarily until they got a house or an apartment, they had to walk from that place into like a Z, and then it like went into an N, but it wasn't far or anything. They said it was like a 4-minute walk. They get there. My dad says, like, when you first walk into the apartment, it's a hallway, right? And straight ahead is the bathroom. Yeah, so to the right, it was a bedroom. And then to the left, it was the living room. And then there was, like, a kitchen on the left side, too. But it was more closer to the bathroom that was, like, straight ahead. Also, a staircase that kind of went upstairs. And it was either 2 or 1 bedroom. He can't recall. He just said, like, it was around that many rooms in this house. So it was a pretty decent sized house for the amount of kids they had. When they first walked into the house and they seen the room on the right side, they said that because of the size of the room, they thought it was a decent enough size for me because, I was young at that time. And they just proceeded to, like, look at the rest of the house, look at the rest of the rooms. And I told y'all how that went, right? So this is when things is about to get, like, kind of creepy. So as they're touring my room, after they look at the whole house, they decide they're gonna look inside of the room that they wanted to give to me. They're looking inside of the room and they see a little door that's about like no bigger than 4 feet tall. They said I was between the ages of 4 and 6, so of course I could fit in that little door. My dad decides that he's gonna like open the door to see how much like crawl space is in this little closet. And when he opens the door, he's looking around and he sees that like a chest could fit inside of the closet. But he's like, okay, yeah, this is cute. Like, this is definitely going to be Jayla's room, right? So he was observing the space of it. But when he goes to close the door, he's looking at the door itself. And on the door itself, it had, like, something written in crayon. He said it was between the colors of, like, purple, red, colors that look like that. But what was written on the door was my name. Like, that's the crazy part about it. So he's like, what the fuck? And he tells my mom, like, yo, look at this. So they're looking at the door, and they like, what the fuck? Getting louder. So the realtor is just like, okay, like, what's going on? Why y'all saying what the fuck? And they're like, my daughter's name is on the door. And the realtor is like, it is? So she looks at it, and my parents asked, like, was there any kids that lived here before, you know, you were putting this house on for sale? And do you know their names by chance? And she said that there was no kids that lived in this home. It was just 2 people that lived in the home, but they didn't have any kids. This sounds really interesting. So my dad proceeds to tell me that after they closed the door, there's a window like right next to the closet area, the little small closet area. And when they look out the window, it's a big ass cemetery. Like, so freaking big. Like, you could see the whole cemetery from the window of the room that was supposed to be mine. So my dad was like, hell no, we're not buying this house. He told my mom, we're not buying this house. We already looked at it. It's time for us to go. So he told the realtor, like, you know, it was nice meeting you. It was nice speaking with you. Thank you for giving us the tour. Hopefully you don't give us a call back. Like, he literally said, we hope you do not give us a call back because we're not buying this. And they were just so freaking freaked out by it. I don't know. This was giving kind of like Coraline. I don't know. You tell me. Yeah, they obviously didn't end up buying the house because of this reason. They also did mention that the way my name was wrote on the door, it looked like a kid wrote it. It didn't look like a grown-up wrote it or like a grown-up tried to act like a kid wrote it. No, it looked like a kid wrote it. They could have had, you know, kids come over and they could have just been writing on the walls. But like, it's the fact that when he looked out the window, it was also a cemetery. And like, out of all names, it chose my name. I don't know. If y'all want more scary story times, comment down below because I try to post as much as possible.
Hi Daisy, my name is Vanessa. Hi Vanessa, thank you for writing in. I hope you're doing well. I have so many stories that I would love to share with you. My parents come from 2 different pueblos in Mexico that are more than 100 years old, and boy do they have a lot of spooky stories. There is one in particular that always gives me the heebie-jeebies. This happened to my uncle on my dad's side of the family about 20-30 years ago in a small pueblo of Carrillo Puerto in Nayarit. My uncle at the time did not have a vehicle and would need to take the only bus that would drive by the entrance of the pueblo, which is about a 15-20 minute walk. Now keep in mind, the pueblo is in the hills, so the road to the pueblo has no streetlights, and vehicles would rarely pass by, as it was very rare to own a vehicle back in the day. At night it is pitch black and the road will only be illuminated by the light of the moon or if you carry a flashlight. Well, one night my uncle was dropped off by the bus as always. It was a long day, so he was eager to get home to a warm dinner. The night was beautiful with a sky full of stars that seemed to be brighter than ever with a gorgeous full moon. My uncle did not need a flashlight as the moon was bright enough for him. As he was making his way up the road, he could see the lights of the pueblo, but also noticed there was someone else up ahead walking down the road towards his direction. As my uncle and the individual got closer, he noticed it was his friend from the pueblo. As he got closer to him, he noticed that he looked very sickly and had huge bags under his eyes, as if he had not slept in days. My uncle shook hands with him and was shocked at how cold his friend's hands were. He ignored it as it was a chilly night. He spoke with him for a few minutes and asked him where he was off to. His friend told him he was going down to another little pueblo that was nearby. After 10 minutes of talking to his friend, they both said their goodbyes and continued on their way. Upon arriving at the pueblo, my uncle noticed there were some comrades sitting outside their house enjoying the night. As my uncle approached them, he asked them about his friend he ran into earlier. He asked if they knew if he was okay, as he looked very sick. His comrade looked at him confused and said, "I think you need to sit down. Toño was in a horrible accident last night. He was feeding the cows and a bull came from behind him and struck him. He landed hard on his head and never woke up. He was pronounced dead. They have his body at the church right now for viewing. It took my uncle a minute to understand what was going on. To this day, my uncle still turns pale when he talks about his encounter with the paranormal. I hope you enjoyed this story. I have many more that I would love to share in the near future.
There's a particular set of rules that they say to follow if you ever encounter the paranormal. Like, for instance, if someone knocks on your door after midnight, you do not answer it. If the phone rings after midnight, you're not supposed to answer it. If something calls your name, it's said that if you respond, it could possess you. If you go to a funeral, and when you're leaving, you should never look back until you get home. If you were in a cemetery, and you should never step on the gravestones or in front of them. Also, if you're at a cemetery, when you drive past the cemetery gates, you should hold your breath. And when you leave a cemetery, always check your back seat. Now, when you're at home, you should never have a mirror facing the back. And you should never have two mirrors facing each other. It's also said that you should never, ever name a spirit in your home. You should never try and communicate with it, and you should never acknowledge it. So what do you think? What rules have you heard to protect yourself or keep yourself safe from the paranormal?
At exactly midnight, I kept on seeing this dark shadowy figure standing right in front of my neighbor's window. I confronted him, and what I saw will shock you. Story time. So this just started happening not long ago. I would wake up to go to the toilet. For some whatever reason, it's always midnight. Then I would see this dark shadowy figure standing right in front of his window. It doesn't move, it doesn't blink, it just stands there and stares. This creeps me out because I am seeing this like every night. And I started to freak out and feel very scared. So I thought, I'm going to confront my neighbor. I kept putting it off. Tell me why. This day I come back from work. It's winter. It gets dark early. But I saw the figure. So I thought, okay, it's now or never. I decided to walk over to his house and knock on his door. He came out and I told him that I'm really sorry, but I keep seeing this dark figure standing right in front of your window every night at midnight. He looked at me very confused, thinking that I'm the crazy one here. I told him that it's there now. So he walked out. I pointed at the window and the figure was still there. He told me to come inside because there is no one who actually lives with him and that room is not being used. I followed him. We walk up the stairs. We go to the bedroom. Tell me why there's only a mirror on the wall, furniture, and that was it. Nothing else. So I leave. But that night, at midnight again, I see the figure. This time, I stepped closer to my bedroom window to take a proper look. Tell me why the figure, that dark shadowy figure, looked exactly like my neighbor, even dressed in the same clothes that he wore when I went to confront him that evening. I decided to ring the police because the figure stared right back at me. The eyes were glowing. I freaked out and I didn't know what to do. So the police came. And they went to the neighbor. They asked me to come to the neighbor's house. I wish I had never ever gone back in there because what I saw will shock you. If you want part 2, please comment part 2.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
In 1996, Blair Adams was 31 years old and living in Surrey, British Columbia. Although in the past he had struggled with substance abuse and alcoholism, over the previous 2 years he had really gotten his act together and got a great job as a foreman at a local construction company. He was known to be a cheerful and friendly guy that did not have any known enemies. But that summer, Blair started exhibiting uncharacteristic mood swings that his mother would describe as being frequent and wild. In a matter of weeks, Blair transformed from being very calm and relaxed and friendly to being totally panicked all the time and always looking over his shoulder, and he was so stressed out he couldn't sleep at night. And he began telling his coworkers that he was fairly certain someone was trying to kill him. And they would say to him, "Blair, I don't think you're okay. You really need to see a doctor." When his mother confronted him about his erratic, paranoid behavior, he told her, "Mom, I really shouldn't tell you about it." And she said, "What's it?" And he said, "Mom, I can't say anything else." And that was it. She could never get any more information out of her son. Blair's strange behavior came to a head on Friday, July 5th, when he went to his bank and withdrew all of the cash out of his account, totaling $6,000. And he also emptied his safety deposit box, which contained thousands of dollars worth of jewelry and gold. 2 days later, on Sunday, he left his house and drove 30 minutes to the Canada-USA border, and he attempted to to enter the United States. But being a single guy carrying a bunch of cash and jewelry and acting really nervous, he fit the profile of a drug trafficker, and so he was denied entry. Frustrated, Blair left and went back to his house, and the next day, which was Monday, he went to his construction site and he abruptly told his boss that he was quitting. And he didn't even pick up his final paycheck. He just left. After leaving the construction site, he went straight to the airport where he promptly purchased a $1,600 round trip to Frankfurt, Germany. Although we don't know why he wanted to go to Frankfurt, Germany, he did work there briefly the year before. His flight was supposed to leave the following day, which was Tuesday, but immediately after purchasing this plane ticket, Blair suddenly decided that he needed to try again to cross into the USA. So he rushed to a friend's house, he knocked on her door, she opens it up and he looks totally disheveled, and he's telling her that someone's trying to kill me, I need your help getting across the border, I just got rejected a couple of days ago, can you please drive me across, you got kids, it'll look much more convincing, can you do that for me? And she was really spooked by his behavior and felt like this is not something I want to get involved with, and so she said, sorry, I can't help you. So Blair headed home where he hid out for the day, and then the next day, Tuesday, he went to the airport, but instead of getting on his flight to Frankfurt, Germany, he went to the front desk and requested a refund, and it was granted. He told them that the person he was going to meet in Germany had gotten sick, and so now he couldn't go. And so the only person he could have been talking about was the girl he had briefly had a fling with when he was there for work the year earlier. But later on, investigators would talk to that German girl, and she would say she was not in touch with Blair, and she definitely was not expecting him. Blair left the airport and rented a car, which was a Nissan Altima, and he immediately went to the US-Canada border, except this time he was able to get across. He made his way to Seattle, Washington, where he went over to their airport and then abandoned his Nissan in the middle of a parking lot and then went down and bought a one-way ticket to Washington, D.C. Now, he paid $770 for this one-way ticket, but he could have just purchased a round trip for half the price. But either way, he boarded the plane that night, and by Wednesday morning, he was in Washington, D.C. He got off the plane and rented another car, which was a Toyota Camry, and then drove 500 miles southwest to Knoxville, Tennessee. Blair was not seen in Knoxville until about 5:30 p.m. that evening when he showed up at a gas station complaining of car troubles. And so the gas station attendant came out to try to help Blair, and he immediately diagnosed what the problem was. Blair was trying to start his Toyota Camry with the key to his Nissan Altima that he had abandoned in Seattle, Washington. And so the attendant pointed out that it was the wrong key, and Blair held it up and said, no, this is the one I was using. And the guy's like, no, it clearly says Nissan on it. And so Blair and this gas station attendant look around the car inside and out for this missing Toyota key. Blair's reaching in his pockets, he can't find it. Blair ends up calling the rental company, but they wind up being closed. And so the gas station attendant says, unfortunately, we're going to have to tow your car, but I'll give you a ride to a nearby hotel. And so Blair accepted the ride, and just after 6 p.m. that night, Blair walked through the front door of the Fairfield Inn and then promptly turned around and walked out. And then walked in, and then walked out, over and over again 5 separate times over the course of an hour before he finally walked up to the front desk and asked for a room. The front desk attendant at the hotel said Blair was totally paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, and just totally on edge the entire time. And then after she gave him his room and he paid for it, he took the key, and instead of going up to his room, he just walked out again and then never came back. The following morning, 2 workers arrived at their construction site right across the street from the Fairfield Inn, and they discovered a body, and it would turn out to be Blair's. He was missing his socks, shoes, and pants, and he had scratches on his hands as well as on his face, but none of the abrasions were that significant. There was $4,000 in German, US, and Canadian currencies lying on the ground around him. Also spread out around Blair was his fanny pack full of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry and gold, a black duffel bag that contained maps and receipts, and then also that missing Toyota car key that they could not find the night before. That was lying on the ground as well. Blair's autopsy showed that he had died from a single violent blow to his stomach, but they had no idea what actually struck his stomach. Toxicology reports showed that Blair had no drugs or alcohol in his system. The only DNA evidence that was found at the crime scene was a single long strand of hair that Blair was clutching in his fist. But there's no more information about this hair online. There were no witnesses, but there was a security guard who claimed to have heard screaming, a woman's scream, coming from the area where Blair was discovered at about 3:30 in the morning. The only lead police had was the sketch of this guy that apparently people had seen Blair talking to outside of a Cracker Barrel restaurant right after Blair had had left the hotel. But police were never able to identify this man. Investigators were baffled. Was Blair telling the truth that someone had been trying to kill him for weeks leading up to his death and they finally caught up to him? And if so, why didn't he tell authorities? Or was Blair delusional and he just happened to run into another killer when he was in Tennessee? Unfortunately, we still have absolutely no idea. In 2000, Mary Lou Morris was a 48-year-old loan officer at a Chase Bank in Houston, Texas. On the morning of October 12th, Mary Lou said goodbye to her husband, Jay, and she headed off to work. That afternoon, Jay gave his wife a phone call, but she didn't pick up. He left her a message, and she never got back to him. This was very unlike Mary Lou, and so Jay was a little bit concerned. At 5 p.m., when he still hadn't heard from her, Jay called her back, but again, she didn't pick up. So Jay called Mary Lou's supervisor, who informed Jay that Mary Lou had actually not come to work that day, and they couldn't get in touch with her either. Jay immediately knew something was wrong, and he called the police. The police had not even begun searching for her when a call came into the station from an ATV rider that happened to be on a road about 3 miles away from Mary Lou's house, and he said he spotted a smoldering car, and it looks like there's someone in the driver's seat that's obviously deceased. Earlier that day at about 10 a.m., the fire department had gotten a call about smoke in that area, but they assumed it was a controlled burn, so they didn't investigate. When the police arrived on scene, it was impossible to tell who the person was that was sitting in the driver's seat, but they were able to find a tooth fragment, and they used that to confirm that it was in fact Mary Lou Morris. It was quickly determined that this was most likely a homicide, and her attacker had probably set this up to make it appear like it could have been self-inflicted. Gasoline had been poured all over Mary Lou and all over the vehicle. However, because of how badly damaged the car and she was, they couldn't determine a cause of death, so they weren't sure if she was deceased when she was placed in the car and it was lit on fire, or if she was in the car and the fire was the cause of death. A number of Mary Lou's valuables were still inside of the car, but her wedding ring was not on her finger. Mary Lou's family and the community at large were shocked. They just could not understand why anybody would want to target such a nice person that had no enemies. The day after Mary Lou's death, a local Houston newspaper received an anonymous call from a guy who just said Mary Lou's death was an accident. And the newspaper tried to get more information, but the person hung up and they couldn't trace the call. At the same time this drama was unfolding for Mary Lou Morris, another drama was unfolding for another Houston woman with the same name. 39-year-old Mary McGinnis Morris was a successful nurse practitioner who by and large got along with all of her coworkers with one exception. A new employee at the clinic, a male nurse named Dwayne Young, was making her feel really uncomfortable. One day when Mary McGinnis got back to her desk, she found all of her pictures of her family had been flipped onto their faces, and in the middle of her desk was a piece of paper that just said death to her. And she knew right away this had to be Dwayne, but she had no way to prove it. And so that night when she went home, she told her husband Mike about this guy Dwayne, and she said, I don't feel safe at work, can you teach me how to shoot a gun? And so he did. He taught her how to shoot a gun, and then he went out and got a pistol, and she tucked it under her driver's seat in her car just in case. On October 16th, so 4 days after Mary Lou Morris was found dead, and 3 days after that anonymous phone call to the newspaper, Mary McGinnis Morris was at a drugstore after work. And as soon as she went inside, she noticed there was this strange man on the other side of the store that was just watching her. She called her best friend Lori to tell her that there was this strange guy and wanted to know what to do. And Lori said, wait for him to leave. But the guy didn't leave. He just stayed in the store and stared at Mary. And so eventually Mary said, you know what? I'm just going to pay for my stuff and get out of here. I got to stop by the office, but I'll be home in just a few minutes. I'll be totally fine. And so Mary hangs up. She buys what she needs. She leaves the store. And then 12 minutes later, she places a frantic 911 call saying someone's trying to kill her. And this 911 call was not made public because apparently on the tape, you can actually hear her being attacked. Mary McGinnis was found later that night in her car. She was deceased. She had a single gunshot wound to the head. It was clear from her 911 call that she had been attacked, and so this was almost certainly a homicide. However, her attacker tried to stage it so it looked like it was self-inflicted. The murder weapon, which was actually her pistol that was tucked underneath her seat, had been placed next to her hand on the seat next to her. None of Mary McGinnis's valuables were stolen. However, her wedding ring was missing from her finger. After Mary McGinnis Morris's death, people began to speculate that her death and Mary Lou Morris's death were connected. Specifically, this was a professional hit gone wrong. The reasoning for this theory is there was just too many coincidences. They shared the same name, they lived in the same city, they were killed within days of each other, and both of their deaths were staged to look like they were self-inflicted. And each woman was missing their wedding ring, which apparently is a common way for professional hitmen to let their clients know that the job was done. The people that subscribe to this theory believe Mary McGinnis Morris was the intended target and Mary Lou Morris was just an accident. And in fact, after killing Mary Lou Morris, the hitman must have realized, whoops, I made a mistake, and they called the newspaper to say, literally, that was a mistake. And then a couple of days later, the hit was successfully carried out on Mary McGinnis Morris. The police looked into this theory and they discovered that Mary McGinnis's husband, Mike, had recently accused her of cheating on him, and he was really upset about it. He also refused to take a polygraph test and would not allow his daughter to talk to the police. And Mary McGinnis had a $700,000 life insurance policy that Mike was in line to receive. And so immediately everybody's like, okay, obviously Mike put a hit out on his wife and that's what started this whole thing. But when they dug into it, they realized that no matter how upset Mike was, there wasn't any evidence that tied him to the killing of his wife or to Mary Lou Morris. And so he was ruled out as a suspect. As for Mary McGinnis's co-worker, Dwayne Young, who wrote "Death to Her" on her desk, it was clear that he did not like Mary, but he was ruled out as a suspect as well. And unfortunately, that's where both of these cases go cold. To date, no one's ever been charged in either murder. In 1993, David Lewis was an accomplished lawyer living in Amarillo, Texas, with his wife Karen and his 9-year-old daughter. He was known to be a devoted husband and father who spent much of his off time supporting various charitable causes. On January 28th of that year, Karen and their daughter decided to leave Amarillo and go to Dallas to spend the weekend shopping together. David, who would normally go with them, decided to stay home because he did not want to miss the Super Bowl, which was that Sunday, the 31st. So Karen and their daughter left, and then a couple of days later, on the 31st, they returned to Amarillo, and they actually got back to their house right after the Super Bowl had ended. And so they anticipated going into the house and finding David either cleaning up after himself or maybe watching the post game. But when they walked in, the TV was still on and turned to the channel the Super Bowl had been on, but David was nowhere to be found. Karen noticed that the VCR was actually still recording. David was known to record all major sports games and watch them again, and so clearly he had not turned off the recording. As Karen walked around the house yelling for her husband, she wasn't that concerned. She figured he must have stepped out or something, but she went into the kitchen and she opened up the fridge and she found there was a plate with 2 freshly made turkey sandwiches on it, which was a sandwich David would often make. And she thought that was pretty weird that he would have made them and then let them sit inside the fridge. And so she closed the fridge and turned around, and on the counter in the kitchen was his wedding band and his watch. And so even though there were all these kind of strange things that Karen was finding in the house, she really wasn't that concerned. There was no sign of forced entry. There was no sign the house had been burglarized. There was no sign of a struggle. And so she assumed her husband must have stepped out to watch the second half of the game at a friend's house and that he would be back later. And so Karen stayed up for a little while, but then ultimately she went to bed thinking he would be there in the morning. But the next morning when she got up, there was no sign of her husband, and so she went to the police. Within 24 hours, the police located David's abandoned car downtown near the courthouse. Under one of the car's floor mats, they located his car keys as well as his house keys. And then within the car, they found his checkbook, his credit cards, and his driver's license, all in the places they should be. They looked into his bank activity and they saw there was a recent deposit for $5,000 into his family's account. They also saw that he recently purchased 2 plane tickets. One was from Los Angeles to Dallas and the other was from Dallas to Amarillo, but it wasn't clear if he had used either of these tickets. When Karen was told about the found car and the strange bank activity, she told police that her husband had recently told her that he actually thought he might be in danger because he was scheduled to give a deposition in Dallas later that month in a conflict of interest case between his old law firm and a wealthy client. And David was being pressured to cover up some of the wrongdoings of his previous law firm, and he just wasn't willing to do that. He told his family that he was going to tell the truth no matter who it hurt. David understood that put a huge target on his back. While police were certainly intrigued at this new information, they didn't have any evidence to support the idea that someone was actively trying to silence David. It was just a conspiracy. And so for 11 months, they looked for new leads and new information, but nothing came out, and David never popped up. He never called home. There was no sign of him. And so after 11 months, the police decided that David must have left of his own accord and that there was no foul play here, and so they closed the case. And after that, David's family unfortunately just had to accept the fact that he was gone and that more than likely no one was ever going to find him again. But in 2004, a state trooper in Washington state was on the internet just researching unsolved mysteries, and he came across a picture of David Lewis, and immediately he recognized that he looked exactly like an unidentified victim of a hit and run case he covered back in 1993. And so he pulled up the details of this hit and run, and he found the victim had been struck a day after David Lewis had gone missing. When this John Doe got hit, he was dressed head to toe Doe in military clothing. He had no bags, he had no ID, and he was walking aimlessly down Highway 24 in Washington State, so 1,600 miles away from Amarillo, Texas, where David Lewis had gone missing. But despite the enormous distance between these two events, this trooper was convinced David Lewis was this John Doe. But as he's looking at the picture of David Lewis, he realizes he has glasses, and he didn't think the John Doe was wearing glasses. But just to be sure, he checked the belongings list of the John Doe, and it said he did have glasses. And it was the exact same kind that David was wearing in the picture. And eventually, DNA would confirm that David Lewis was the John Doe. Now, this solved the mystery of where David Lewis went, but it did not solve the mystery of why he went there. Why did David go to Washington, a place where he has no ties? And if David was the one who hit record on his VCR on the night of the Super Bowl, that means he would have only had less than 24 hours to move 1,600 miles to Washington State without his car. And why was he wearing military clothing? Was that his clothing? Did he buy it? Did someone make him wear it? Where was his luggage? What was he doing walking down the highway? David's assertions to his wife that his life was in danger, his demeanor as a loving family man, and the nature of his job as an attorney has many people, his family included, believing that he was the victim of foul play. But officially, the police have said David left the house of his own accord, and his death was ruled an accident.
I cried when I heard this story, both sad and happy tears, and I can almost guarantee you that you're gonna cry as well. This case is so heavy, trigger warning, I'm about to say why. The dad murdered his mom and his sister right in front of him and then turned against him. Luckily, little Ronnie survived, but the dad would go on to choose to represent himself in court, and he would be the one to cross-examine his own son, which should be illegal. With all that being said, have to give my usual disclaimer, this case does involve a child. It's also incredibly graphic and disturbing and heartbreaking to listen to, so if you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, or form, I totally understand. Skip this video and I will see you in my next one. Take care of yourselves. I mean it. I love you. On March 18th of 2018, authorities received a 911 call, and on the call, you can clearly hear that something is very wrong. Someone is hurt. You hear a woman say, "God help me, please. Jesus help me. I am shot." People are yelling. The operator can't really seem to make out exactly what's going on before the call disconnects. And then another 911 call comes in, but this time it's a man's voice. The call is coming from the same house, and you can hear the man saying, quote, "I've just been attacked by some white demons," end quote. More things can be heard on the call, but it's mostly just sound and chaos until that call disconnects. Officers and paramedics are dispatched to the house, and when they get there, they see a woman on the ground, very badly injured. She's lying unconscious in the front yard. She had a gaping wound to her arm. She had missing teeth. Her face was barely recognizable. Her injuries were so far, they were too far gone. She could not be saved, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. And then a tall man emerged from the house that was on fire, mind you, Ronnie O'Neal III. We're going to be referring to him as O'Neal for the remainder of this video. It does not take long for authorities to figure out what happened inside of that house that night in March. O'Neal had not only brutally murdered the mother of his children, which was the woman lying on the front yard, 33-year-old Kenyatta, but he had also murdered his 9-year-old special needs daughter, Ronivia. She would be found inside of that house. And O'Neal had then gone after his 8-year-old son, Ronnie O'Neal IV. Yes, they're both named Ronnie O'Neal, don't get confused. O'Neal had murdered his entire family, then grabbed a gasoline can, poured that out everywhere, including on the bodies of his 2 children, and then set his house on fire. But what he did not know yet, and what he was about to find out within minutes of authorities arriving at the scene while he was sitting in the back of the police car after being detained, was that little Ronnie had made it out. The 8-year-old little boy had survived the attack by a miracle, and with officers and paramedics there, he stumbled out of the house, walked out of the house, and collapsed onto the ground. His injuries were so bad, specifically the ones to his stomach, that his intestines were falling out of his body. The little boy was tightly holding onto his stomach as tight as he could because he was literally holding his intestines in, preventing them from falling out. He was airlifted to a Tampa hospital where he would undergo a lot of treatment for his many injuries. At first, doctors thought there was absolutely no way that Ronnie would have made it through the night. But once he was taken care of, little Ronnie would be the only surviving witness able to tell detectives what exactly happened that night. After O'Neal had been detained and was sitting inside of the police car, he referred to his murder victim Kenyatta by calling her the devil and referred to his own children as the devil's kids. He was taken and booked into jail. So how did we get to this point? I'll tell you, but we have to backtrack a little bit. 33-year-old Kenyatta and O'Neal were once together. They had been in a relationship at one point, obviously had 2 children together, little Ronnie and his older sister, Ronivia. They broke up in 2012 and went their separate ways. Kenyatta kept the kids. O'Neal was ordered to pay child support, though he very quickly fell behind on those payments. He was not a good guy for a lot of reasons, but the 2 of them were completely separated. O'Neal even met another woman, got into a relationship with her, had a kid with her. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, Kenyatta, Ronivia, and little Ronnie all lived together, and they were very happy. Kenyatta was the best mom to her children. She loved and adored them more than anything in this world, and they loved her just as much back. Literally, the first thing that anyone says when you bring up Kenyatta is how good of a mom she was. She loved being a mom. She loved spending time with her children. They were always together, going to church, going to the movies, going to the park. And I mentioned Ronivia, the little girl, being special needs. She was born a preemie, very, very, very premature, and she went through a lot of health complications because of that, also meaning that she needed extra care and attention as she was growing up. She was nonverbal. Ronnie and Kenyatta had learned sign language to be able to communicate with her better. And although things at times were not easy, they more than made it work. Kenyatta would have done anything for her. She would have done anything for either of her children, and it's only that much more sad and heartbreaking knowing and understanding how good the family was. That house was full of life and love until O'Neal came back into the picture. In 2017, O'Neal was very badly injured in a drive-by shooting. He almost did not recover from the injuries that he sustained, but he did. And afterwards, he needed help being taken care of. Nobody in his life wanted to help him. Nobody that knew him. He literally could not find a single person who was willing to help him, to take care of him, to be there for him. Not a single person in his entire life, probably because he was an awful human being. But out of the goodness of her heart, Kenyatta offered to help him. And from my understanding, she was 0% interested in rekindling their relationship at all. She did not care to be romantically involved with him in any way, shape, or form again. She was literally just like, okay, fine, you have nowhere to go. You are the father of my children. I guess you can stay at our house while you get back on your own 2 feet, and then you'll leave, okay? Whatever. So O'Neal moves in with the three of them, and only 5 months later, the murders occurred. That kind of gives you an idea as far as the dynamic inside of the household goes. Now, as far as to what exactly happened for O'Neal to want to murder his entire family, well, this is his version of events according to what he told authority. After his arrest, O'Neal told investigators that earlier that night, him and Kenyatta had gone into a pretty bad argument. The argument escalated to the point that it got physical because of Kenyatta. This is what O'Neal is telling authorities. He was saying that she was the one who started everything, pretty much. He was claiming self-defense like an idiot, as if anyone who saw that crime scene would believe him. But he says that he was scared of his life because he thought that Kenyatta was going to kill him, and so, quote, I killed her first, end quote. It was clear that he was lying. He was just full of shit. And investigators were only further able to confirm that after 8-year-old little Ronnie was stable enough to tell his version of events and what he saw that night. According to little Ronnie, he remembers his mom and dad getting into an argument, which I guess wasn't uncommon. They argued quite often, which is probably the reason as to why they broke up in the first place. Ronnie remembers that in the middle of that argument, his mom ran away from O'Neal. She was scared of him. She ran into a bedroom and hid herself in a closet, locking herself in the closet to hide from him. And then his dad got a hold of a shotgun. He had pulled Kenyatta out of the closet and hit her in the head with it, and then he began chasing her around the entire house, eventually out into the front yard. Ronnie stayed inside, so he didn't see exactly what happened outside, but we know that outside, O'Neal had beaten and shot Kenyatta until she was unconscious. And then O'Neal walked back into the house alone. He grabbed an axe and turned his attention to his daughter, Ronivia, who was in her bedroom, just sitting on her bed. He dragged her out of bed and into the hallway. Little Ronnie this entire time was just standing there, frozen in fear, witnessing all of this happening, when O'Neal grabbed the axe and swung it with as much force as possible, ending Ronivia's life right in front of his 8-year-old son. O'Neal then grabbed the gasoline can and poured it everywhere, all over Ronivia, all over the floors and walls of the house, including all over Ronnie himself. O'Neal then lit a match and threw it on top of little Ronnie, but he was able to break free and he ran away from his dad. However, O'Neal would catch up to him and he would grab him, this time with a kitchen knife in hand, and he used that all over Ronnie, leaving him with an endless amount of injuries all over him and specifically all over his stomach. And again, we know that those injuries were so bad that eventually when Ronnie did stand up, he literally had to hold himself together to prevent his insides from coming out. Then O'Neal grabbed another match and used that, lighting fire to the entire house and everyone in it. His entire version of events, Ronnie had to retell in court when he was now 11 years old, when O'Neal's trial finally took place, and O'Neal had decided to represent himself in court. Not only was he a pure evil man, but he also had an ego the size of the entire earth. Of course, he was facing very serious charges, but for some reason he pled not guilty, and he really thought in his little tiny pea-sized brain that he was going to get away with this. He really thought that he would be able to argue his case in court, still holding on to the self-defense claim, and he really thought that he was going to get out of this. But representing himself meant that he would be the person questioning witnesses, and the sole surviving witness was his now 11-year-old son. Thankfully, Ronnie did not have to see his father face to face. He joined the courtroom virtually, but he was still questioned by O'Neal, which literally to me, I'm like, why is that not illegal? But Ronnie retold the story as he remembered it, O'Neal asking him, "Did I hurt you that night?" Ronnie answered yes. O'Neal asked him, "How did I hurt you?" Ronnie answered, "You stabbed me." During the cross-examination, O'Neal tried to point out inconsistent statements that his son had said, trying his best to paint out his little son to sound like a liar, but the jury was not having any of it. You could see the trauma in little Ronnie's eyes. It was devastating. Ultimately, in June of 2021, O'Neal was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated 1 count of arson, and 1 count of resisting a law enforcement officer. A state attorney describing the murders, quote, "among the most cruel and vicious our community has ever seen," end quote. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus 90 years. He is currently serving his sentence in Florida. Now, as far as little Ronnie goes, for a little bit of a happy ending, after that tragic night in March of 2018, 8-year-old little Ronnie laid in a hospital bed, burned and wounded, not expected to survive. A detective by the name of Mike Blair had responded to the horrific crime scene and had learned that there was one surviving witness, the only one who had survived. And he visited Ronnie in the hospital, also later recalling that there was, quote, "no expectation Ronnie would live," end quote. But seeing Ronnie in the state that he was in pulled at his heartstrings, as it would for anyone, but especially knowing that Ronnie would now just be on his own. After he recovered, he really had no family to go back to. So Mike spent a lot of time visiting Ronnie in the hospital. He would hang out with him, he would talk to him, he would listen to his stories that he had to tell about his mother and his sister, and he continued showing up for Ronnie just to be there, to be a person to keep him company. On one of those nights when Mike Blair was getting ready to head out for the night, little Ronnie grabbed his hand and asked him, quote, "could you watch a movie with me," end quote. That night, Mike was supposed to go meet up with his wife for date night, but he literally just couldn't leave Ronnie. He couldn't say no to him. So instead, he invited his wife with him to the hospital, and all 3 of them, Mike, his wife, and Ronnie, watched a movie together. That night built such a strong bond between all of them, and then Mike's wife then began being a frequent visitor in the hospital to spend time with Ronnie. Eventually, when Ronnie was healed and healthy again, he was placed into the foster care system. But Mike Blair told them about this relationship that he had built with Ronnie, not only him, but also his wife, and he said to let him know if anything happens, or if he needs anything, or if he needs help with Ronnie at all, he told them to call him. So Ronnie was taken into foster care. He was placed with a foster care family. I actually think he was placed in a few different ones, but it really wasn't working out. So then they called Mike Blair saying, "Hey, we're trying to put Ronnie with a family. We're trying to find him a family, but he's just really having a hard time settling. Do you know anyone who would take him in?" And without hesitation, Mike said, "Bring him to me. I will take him." He didn't ask his wife. He didn't ask his children. He didn't ask anyone at all, because he knew that his family would be more than happy to welcome little Ronnie. So on the phone, no questions asked, he said, "I will take him. Bring him to me." Mike and his wife welcomed Ronnie into their house with open arms, introduced him to all 5 of their children, and made him feel cared for from the moment that he stepped into their house. They took such good care of him, helping him adjust, taking him to all of his doctor's appointments, feeding him, playing with him, paying attention to him, being a family for him. And then in November of 2019, Ronnie was officially adopted, and he changed his name to Ronnie Blair, joining a loving family of 8. Today, little Ronnie is thriving. I literally have goosebumps again, but he has more than expressed his gratitude towards the Blair family, who is now his family. He's also adopted a new little saying that he came up with his new family that he will repeat to himself in times of stress. It goes, quote, "I am safe, I am loved, and I am part of this family," end quote. And about his new family, he's also said, quote, "They are really nice people. They are the best moms and dads, and they really take care of me. There is no one else better than them," end quote. I cried when I first heard that, because after such a traumatizing, horrific event, it warms my heart to know that little Ronnie is now with people who love him and care him and truly have his best interest at heart. Thank God for the Blair family. Anyway, that is all I have for this video. Thank you for spending time with me today and listening to little Ronnie's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
Do you notice anything strange about this photo? It was late summer 2023 and Connor and Betty Bowman were living in Minnesota. On the outside looking in, they had the perfect life. They were both in their early 30s, they had well-paid jobs, and they had a really cute dog. What more could you want? Betty worked as a pharmacist and so was obviously super intelligent, but she was also really full of life, super vibrant and outgoing. And Connor had a very similar job actually. He specialized in poison science. Again, very intelligent and knew his stuff. The pair had been married since 2021 and they were actually a little unconventional in their relationship, no judgment, but they were like, we want to be committed to each other here, but we also want to kind of explore other things on the side. So they had this kind of open relationship situation. And I don't know what you guys think, but I do think it definitely takes a certain type of personality to be in a relationship like this. You certainly need to both have really good communication and make sure you're on the same page. Now that month, suddenly and very unexpectedly, Betty started getting really horrible symptoms. She was feeling sick, feeling faint, rushing to the toilet every 5 minutes. So she got taken into hospital. She was just really, really unwell. And the doctors had never seen anything like it. They couldn't put their finger on why she'd just suddenly, out of the blue, gone really downhill. Something was wrong with her heart. She had fluid buildup in her lungs. She even had to have part of her colon removed. And horrifically, 4 days later, she was dead. Medics were like, we've only seen cases this bad where someone's been poisoned. Her friends were understandably absolutely devastated, but they were like, we actually need to speak to police because we've got some information. Betty had told them that the night before her husband had given her a smoothie and it was so gross, it tasted so horrible that she was sick. And that was a little bit weird because Connor, the husband, never mentioned that to anybody in the hospital or the police when they were questioning him. He actually was going around telling people that she had a rare autoimmune disease and that's what killed her. Everyone else was like, sorry, what autoimmune disease? Connor was also acting super weird. He seemed to want to get everything done in a hurry. He was like, don't bother with an autopsy. We just want to get her cremated. I don't want her to be kind of sat round as like a body. And get this, just days before she'd even died, he was Google searching the term widow, asking if it was gender neutral. The word started to spread about Connor and how this open relationship actually might have started to cause issues within the relationship. Betty apparently found out that Connor was not only seeing another girl, but had also got feelings for this woman. She was like, that goes against the rules that we set about this open relationship. We were very clear. We are married to each other. We're committed to each other. Yes, we can have little things on the side, but there's no feelings involved. It seemed though Connor had disregarded this and totally got invested in another person. And the widow thing wasn't the only wild Google search that he made around the time of his wife's death. Before she even went into hospital, he'd Googled her weight and researched what the exact dosage of a gout medicine would be to be fatal. And guess what she was found to have in her system? Now, he also asked Google whether Google searches could be used against you in court. I hate to break it to you, Connor, they can. And a friend of Connor's actually even came forward to police to be like, I know I'm this guy's friend and I kind of shouldn't really be telling you this, but something doesn't sit right with me. Actually told me that he was going to get $500,000 after his wife died because of a life insurance payout. So everything was stacking up against Connor, obviously, and he was arrested 2 months after his wife's death. He's currently awaiting trial for murder, but I'm interested, what do you guys think? Is there a potential innocent explanation for all of this? To me, it just freaks me out that I definitely wouldn't be able to tell by this photo that there was anything wrong with this couple, and it just goes to show you don't know what's going on behind the scenes.